Hey everyone, it's Dan Pendergraft, aka DPend, and here we are for a video in a very stripped down style. And I've really wanted to make these type of videos, but there's always an excuse. And by these type of videos, I mean videos talking about various topics, sort of like we used to do back in the day. Shout out to anyone who remember those days. Back in, let's see, I think it was 2016 or so. 2015, 2016. So we'll see how it is, because I don't have headphones on to monitor the audio just based on the logistics of my setup. It's not feasible to stretch this far, but I still should be able to use the Blue Yeti audio. So just a quick update on what I've been doing. Just spending a lot of time trying to learn the ins and outs of Final Cut Pro, and that's been super fun. So I've been working on really intensive audio visualization projects recently, and especially the ones that are in conjunction with my friend Rusty Jernigan, great musician and composer. It's been extremely exciting just getting that off the ground, and that goes into the whole idea of just creating daily in whatever field that you're trying to pursue and seeing where that takes you. And it really, you end up blossoming forth. You know, I did that with poetry and seeing a lot of progress there, and my friend Rusty did that with doing electronic beats, and so there's a huge repository of that material. And so when I started getting more interested in getting the skill of visualization, when you realize that so many people rely on their visual sense for their comprehension of meaning, right? So if you're a more auditory based artist like a poet or a musician, you start to comprehend, wow, there's going to be a lot of power there if I was able to tap into that visual side of things. And that was also why I always wanted to put a lot of pictures with my posts when I was making blogs. I made hundreds of poetry blogs as in the process of documenting my sort of creative journey. So let's see how I cut that down in Final Cut Pro to be somewhat comprehensible, I guess. Okay, so instead of rambling on about every little minutia about all of that, I'd want to say thank you very much to everyone who's been supporting the channel. Appreciate you liking the video, subscribe to the channel, and leaving comments. It really brings me a lot of motivation, along with the internal motivation that I feel. Oh yeah, hopefully I don't feel like too much of a ghost here, because I guess I'm brown on brown, and you know, they say not to have a cluttered background, but hey, this might actually be a little bit too simple. So just focus on the floating poltergeist right here. So this video, I wanted to see how much we could stay on topic with discussing dealing with societal pressure towards mediocrity. And within that, I would include societal pressure into being one thing, right? Being an expert in one field to the neglect of other aspects of life, and then letting other experts or other specialists handle those fields. And the reason why I wanted to talk about this, by the way, when I have these talks, it's not necessarily me lecturing. It's really practicing the skill of going through one's thoughts. It's sort of like having a simulated dialogue with you, right? So it's a lot of the time I'll be sort of feeling like I'm having a conversation, I suppose, with myself or a simulated viewer, in the sense of trying to determine what might be a response to one way of thinking of things, because there's always multiple sides. And in a great sense, that's just what intellection is anyway. If you pay attention to your mind, you'll realize that there's a lot of things going back and forth. So it's quite humorous that people actually view themselves as just one thing or one stable entity that's, you know, identifiable by a specific name and specific characteristics, when it's always shifting. That being said, this topic really speaks to me because I think that being in being born at the beginning of the 90s and seeing the growth into internet and sort of experience a transition from a world before internet into the world with internet when it was becoming very ubiquitous, there was all sorts of things that resulted in being able to access any type of information right at your fingertips. And our whole world has become so much faster paced, and there are infinite possibilities at your fingertips. I mean, you can go and order books on anything you want to learn. Within reason, there's a lot that you can do. However, within that, there's this tendency to just be overwhelmed by all of that and have society be completely fine with you just being mediocre and just scraping by. And there's another form of mediocrity that is actually excellence in such a narrow discipline that one is sort of helpless in many other things, and that seems to be relatively sustainable a lot of the time because, well, we have other specialists around us, but people don't often realize how unnatural of a pattern that really is for a human being, because we're really not specialists, we're actually generalists, and that's what allowed us to be apex predators and be at the top of the food chain, so to speak, because we were capable of integrating all aspects of our existence and thinking about shelter, thinking about food and preserving it. And even within tribes, because people will argue that point that, oh, there's a medicine man and this person was a master of creating axes and this person was a master hunter and this person was a master artist, etc. Well, there'll always be niches. But there is sort of this promotion of just being one thing on a neurotic degree, and doing that for maybe 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years. And I think that causes a lot of midlife crises, or at least I would speculate that might be a contributing factor, not that I would know. But anyhow, how do you deal with this pressure towards, I suppose this is more of a talk based on how to deal with the pressure towards being one thing. So let's go ahead and mend that, and I'll rewind myself and reintroduce it. So I really wanted to talk about this pressure that society has towards making you one thing. And we can trace it to its origin point where you're in high school usually. Now, not that you haven't thought about it before then, but if you ask a 5 or a 6-year-old kid, what do you want to be? They'll say, I want to be an astronaut, or I want to be this. And we encourage it. We want kids to dream big, and we think it's adorable, and if you're a good parent or whatnot, you hopefully are realistic, but you also just encourage a child in whatever dream they may have. And that is very much not the case when you're an adult. If you were to suddenly switch from one thing to another, usually the general reaction is ridicule, and even to the point of shaming someone that the only reason why they switched is, oh, they've failed in this field. We have a very negative perception towards the idea of being a jack of all trades, master of none, although sometimes that's more jovial in nature. And by the way, if you see me glance down, I did take some brief notes just because it helps me stay on task. If you were around, which would be almost no one, when I used to make my philosophical podcasts, you know that it is extremely easy for me to go on tangents, so I find it's better if I put a little few points that I can sort of corral myself back to. Okay, so basically you can trace it back to the transition between childhood and adulthood, and it usually happens, it was the most intense that I remember around high school, because it was a jarring switch where suddenly, from just encouraging you to pursue everything, you're taking math, science, language, you're doing everything, you're in band or you are in athletics, and you're just pursuing your humanhood to the fullest, and then suddenly they drop the bomb on you, or depending on what age you are, if you're in a less fortunate circumstance, then obviously you grow up earlier, and this happens at a younger age, but they start asking you, well, what is it you want to do? And it's sort of perplexing at first, because any human being wants to continue experiencing all aspects of reality to the fullest extent, because that's sort of the passion of living out your existence as a human being, right? Not a human doing, but one who is actually embodying the existence of a sentient being wants to experience the widest degree and the deepest depth of whatever experience that this realm and this vessel, physical body, is able to bring, right? So it's very jarring whenever they start to insinuate this concept into you, which, depending on your degree of shelteredness or privilegedness, can be quite a shock for them to start asking what exactly it is you want to do. And certainly in my case, I found it very confusing, because I had so many different interests, and so I definitely felt pigeonholed myself, and felt like I was pigeonholing myself into being a musician, and knew that it was sort of a foolish thing to pursue. But I also knew that I had a great proclivity towards the arts, and as an adolescent, a lot of times that way of expressing oneself is very important at that age, depending on your precociousness, or depending on the individual, basically. So how do you deal with that as you grow up? A lot of people end up just burying their dreams. In fact, probably the majority do, because if you really examine your consciousness, you'll find out that you have really huge aspirations, and people will a lot of times be able to hide that from themselves in their subconscious by complimenting you. So compliment is not always a compliment, because they'll say, oh wow, you're so ambitious, or you're so intelligent, or you're a genius, and they'll say things to you if you try to actually enact those dreams that you have within the deeper recesses of yourself, which they have as well, but they'd prefer to just instead compliment you than admit it. Or a lot of times they're not aware, of course, but that's also why it's so important to have some type of discipline, whatever you figure out that works, to have some way to strengthen the bridge that exists between the subconscious, the consciousness, and the superconscious, because you can become aware of those underlying urges that are leading you to different types of behavior, but it can be quite difficult, but in any case. So it can be an awkward thing if you actually decide that you want to really embrace those kind of crazy dreams. But what I would recommend anyone to do, now again, I'm not ever saying that I'm in a position to give anyone advice, because well, for plenty of reasons. But when I do these talks, I'm not specifically just trying to position myself as an expert to give you advice, but more so to have a conversation both with myself, which might sound strange, but it's true, on a more conscious level, but also with you, and we can have a dialogue. So I'm always looking for commentary and feedback. You can either leave it as a comment, or in the future I'd love to also do collabs where you can make a video response to this, or we could do a video together discussing various concepts, and it's just a jumping off point for you to ponder something on a deeper level, or maybe for you to glean something from my experience that may help you moving forward. So let's see if I can get to any of these points without rambling. Basically, to deal with that pressure, I believe, without just burying your dreams and giving up, or just taking a job and seeing the societal ways of, say, having a spouse or having kids, having a household, having wealth, having a vehicle, having etc., X, Y, and Z, generally materially based thing that signifies success, what was I saying? Oh, right. I believe that in order to keep those sort of what you would term as unrealistic dreams, unrealistic but powerful dreams, you need to have a strong internal sense of both motivation as well as meaning. And that often means developing a personal philosophy and or spirituality, depending on how you see it, that is self-reifying or strengthening in and of itself, to where you're actually not dependent on external entities to know why it is you're doing what you're doing. And that's not something that I would say the majority of people develop that strongly. So if you are looking to not just be a narrow specialist but develop a lot of things, it's somewhat of a prerequisite to both have a strong internal motivational sense and also a strong ability to feel fulfillment or reward yourself for small victories as you're going. And along with that, reducing the need for external validation, because that can be hard to get unless you may be very lucky and have extremely supportive friends and family that are just willing to cheerlead you on in your new endeavors. But it also can be very difficult because people can be made to feel very uncomfortable. They can also feel worried for you, that you're maybe not making the right choice by pursuing so many things. And this video is not going to be about specifically how to pursue many things, because that's difficult in and of itself and would be its own discussion. Because, well, especially for a male, I believe, because that's just my experience on this lifetime, it can often be best. You need to really have a main focus. So you can do many things in your life, but in my experience, what's worked for me is focusing on one thing pretty intensely while you're cycling through those, and then figuring out how long you need to make something your main focus in order to build up a sufficient amount of skill, so that when it becomes more of a side endeavor, you still have a great degree built there. Let's see. Oh, I just wanted to mention an experiential technology, you could term it, on how to deal with societal pressure, is sort of deconstruct it for yourself by looking at the things that are considered to be necessary, desirable, normal, indicators of success, and see if they are. For instance, if society says that it's success to have a romantic relationship, try being by yourself for a few years. See if, determine for yourself if the factors that someone else is telling you signify happiness, success, or whatever beneficial thing that appears to be a necessary part of the human experience. Figure out if it is, and you'll find half the time the things that people believe they need is not anywhere close to the truth. Another really necessary thing is just to become aware of the many manifestations of yourself there are, the roles that you play. So if you're a father, the role that you play as a father, the role that you play as a son, the role that you play as an employee at your work, or the role that you play when you're being an independent scholar, if you're a musician, all these different aspects of yourself, and try and figure out how they integrate, because that will really help the whole internal motivational force. Because if you can understand how all of these different aspects that you find value in can work together, then you will know beyond the shadow of a doubt that what you're doing is the right thing to do, even if society would prefer you to be more unidimensional. And lastly, I just want to conclude this video by recommending that anyone write down your craziest dreams or your most lofty, your most unrealistic things that you would like to achieve for your existence. And perhaps it is easier the younger you are, but not necessarily, because I've found that as I've gotten older, there's a greater urgency knowing that the mortal existence will eventually come to a close, that there are these things that you want to actually try before you pass from this realm or move on to the next transformation of whatever happens after this. Hopefully I'll be able to edit this talk into something resembling coherence, into something that could be useful to watch and or enjoyable. Probably not too much editing to make it entertaining, because that's not exactly the point of this video. It's meant to be more thought-provoking and a jumping off point for discussions, and just a different side of myself on this channel, rather than only solely spending all my time putting together 1 to 3 minute long intensely what could I call them? Intense geometric studies of video novicehood. Okay, that's going to be it for me today. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and the bell button so you can get notifications of more videos. And I love and appreciate you all, and hope you have a wonderful day. DPend out. Peace.